Welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Twisters. This is the new action thriller sequel to the movie Twister that came out in 1996. That one was Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. This movie's leading couple, I guess, is Daisy Edgar-Jones and Glenn Powell. Now, I will say right out of the gate, I am absolutely, I can call it now, going to be on the wrong side of the table from the majority of audiences that go to see this film. I am already seeing some reviews come in. People seem to really be blown away and loving this movie. And now I'm not saying that I think that Twisters was bad. I just did not think it was that great. I feel like I probably fall in line more so with, if you're looking at Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score, which hurts me in my soul, than the audience score. I thought that some of the action sequences in this film were really great. It was definitely entertaining, but where it fell short for me was just there is no originality really happening here. Twisters, in my opinion, is just a copy and paste of the original Twister film, pretty much beat for beat. There are a lot of the same things that happen. It's just changed a little bit. For instance, in the original Twister, the movie theater scene in Twisters now is just a rodeo instead. I feel like the soundtrack also in Twisters was not as appealing to me as the soundtrack from Twister. And I felt like the original crew in Twister, I had a lot more connection to than I did in Twisters. So for any of you who kind of don't know what Twisters is all about, I'm going to give a little bit of a rundown without giving away any spoilers. I'm going to try not to give away any spoilers. But basically, we've got Daisy Edgar-Jones, and she is this sort of college student who comes up with an idea of injecting a tornado with polymers that will basically take away the moisture, is what I gather out of it. I don't know if that's entirely correct, but the moisture out of a tornado, which essentially will kill a tornado. She tries to do this with her first crew, basically just a bunch of her college friends and her boyfriend, and it goes terribly awry, as you would expect. And then we jump forward 5 years. There are two teams very similar to the way that it was in Twister. The only difference now, and kind of where I feel like it ended up missing the mark for me in particular, was that we are pretty closely following both teams. Whereas like in the first film, you got a little bit more connection to, Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton's sort of side of things, because Carrie Elwes's Twister team or Tornado Chaser team, we didn't see that much. He was definitely sort of just the antagonist of the film, and we didn't really get to see a lot of his crew, what they were doing, in order to get attached to them in any way. But in Twisters, they are spending about an equal amount of time between Glenn Powell's Storm Chaser YouTube group and then Daisy Jones's kind of scientific, more money sort of crew, right? So she essentially ends up firstly joining what would have been Carrie Elwes's team in the original film, and then finding her way over to Glenn Powell's team because romance, right? Like that's basically how it works out in the film. Again, I think this was pretty much beat for beat, just a carbon copy of Twister, but I didn't really, I liked Daisy Edgar-Jones's character. I was fine with Glenn Powell. I didn't, dislike him in any way. I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the characters in this just because I don't feel like you really get to know them too much, and they also seemed a little bit like the Wish or Temu versions of like the crew that we got from the original Twister. Like they definitely didn't seem as good of a crew to me as the original casting. And then I don't know, I'm sure the majority of you do not follow me on social media of any kind, but I was talking on Threads kind of about how I had more recently gotten into actually watching some of the storm chasers on YouTube, you know, like Reed Timmer. There is another kid who I watch. His name is Cody. I'm not going to be able to remember his last name. I apologize because I actually do like him. And so I've really gotten into sort of watching those YouTuber storm chasers. And I was sort of insulted on their behalf in what's going on with this movie. It sort of, you know, kind of made the YouTuber storm chasers look incredibly stupid and just like there for the attention, which yes, I would gather that's what YouTuber storm chasers are doing. Obviously, they are doing it because they want people to be watching their lives and giving them views. But I've never actually seen like Reed Timmer or anyone on his team act as ridiculous during storms as the crew in this film. I kind of was hoping, and maybe this is just my naivete in terms of how movies are done these days, but I was sort of hoping because it had been quite a long time since we got the original Twister, that they would do the second one, you know, equally as compelling. Obviously, you're going to be in for sort of a thrill ride, but I was really hoping they would kind of go a little bit more realistic and just sort of make it feel more true to life and thus make it that much more scary because you could actually believe some of the things that were happening. But instead, they went the exact opposite way with it. Like the things that happen in this movie to me were just so out in left field that I was like 10 times over these people would be dead. Like they're just being ridiculous. They're just being a little bit too over the top. I don't really enjoy that too much. Like in 1996, when the original movie came out, it was exciting, I think, because really we were breaking ground and getting into new territory as far as what CGI could do at the time, that it was exciting to sort of see some of that stuff that was like, oh, this is kind of ridiculous. And of course, they never would have really made it, you know, with the big truck that sort of bumps their car and gets them, you know, like and blows up and all of that stuff. But everything was sort of kicked up 10 times as much in Twisters, which I get, you know, you want to go harder for the sequel, but it made it that much more like unbelievable to watch. And it was harder to kind of get connected to these characters for me anyway. I would say that I don't think it's a terrible like movie. I think it is very entertaining. The story this time around just didn't grab me quite as much as the first one did. I did enjoy the fact that they got Bill Paxton's son in this film, but he has such a small part that honestly, it didn't even occur to me who it was until I was out of the theater and I was like, oh wait, Bill Paxton's son. And I had to like try and remember where he had been in the film. We do also get to see the first appearance of the new Superman. He is in this film. I enjoyed his character okay. He seems a little bit wooden. I don't know that this is the best one to judge like what his performance as Superman is gonna be, because I feel like the character that he was playing was meant to be a little bit wooden, so maybe he did a fantastic job. I do feel that Twisters was a lot darker in some areas than the first Twister was, even though both of them pretty much kind of steer along that same line of, you know, obviously it's tragic, the things that are happening. But I feel like this one just kind of was a little bit less entertaining to me, a lot more corny to me than the first one. I did watch the first film again like yesterday before I went to the theater today to see the second one. So maybe that had something to do with it. Really seeing how close the plots were between both of them ruined it a little bit to me. I was really hoping they would come up with their own sort of spin on it, which they did not seem to do. I kind of knew that they were going to borrow some things. Obviously, you saw some of that in the trailer, but I had hoped they would sort of go in their own direction, and they really didn't. I don't see this one as being something that like the majority of audiences aren't really going to enjoy. Obviously, people are really loving it. I do think as far as like an action thriller is concerned, this one is going to tick all of those boxes if you don't care so much about like a copycat plot or, you know, really getting invested in characters all that much. If you are there for the thrill ride of it, I think you will definitely enjoy this one. Those are my thoughts for Twisters. I would love to know what you guys thought if you have seen this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.